I don't like looking at it as opening up yourself to being harmed. I do, but I don't. That's like too vulnerable for me. I don't know if I'm mature enough for that yet. Hey everyone, I'm JusmeShakoyahD and welcome to my bubble. This channel is for Black women who are on their self-love journey, who are learning to take off their superwoman capes and put themselves first. My bubble is my safe space to express myself as I inspire you to do the same on your journey. This is Love the Creative Black Woman, a series where we self-care through crafting as we connect on our self-love journey together. Yeah, let's get into it. Hey, Erica. All right, so last week we talked about vulnerability. We were getting started on talking about vulnerability, what it is, the different phases, and I just want to say to start this episode off, I am not an expert at all. I'm learning to be an expert of me, okay? That's my only thing. So I originally said that I didn't want to do too much research, or like, okay, I had a moment where I wanted to do more research. Then I had a moment where I was like, you know what? I don't want to do too much research. I did a little bit of research on vulnerability because, as I mentioned in the last episode, and if you haven't watched it yet, make sure you check it out. It's on one of these sides above me. So make sure you click on that and go check out the last episode on vulnerability. But I was saying that I believe that there are likely multiple types of vulnerability that we don't even really know about. So I was looking into vulnerability. Now, first of all, if you start to Google vulnerability, just like on the basis, most of the stuff that's going to pop up is actually about cybersecurity. So there's that. But after you get past that stuff and you start to specify your research and your keyword search, and I went from basically like vulnerability types to vulnerability in Black women and stuff like that. So when I was looking up the vulnerability types, I found that there are actually 5 different types of vulnerability, I guess, that are recognized when it comes to people. And I'm going to read those to you now. And I found this interesting because, I mean, who really be thinking about vulnerability like that? I mean, like, we do, but we don't. Unless this is like a part of your, I guess, what you specialize in. Most times you're not really thinking about vulnerability, especially as a superwoman, as somebody who has things to do, places to go, people to see. You are not thinking about what vulnerability is, what it looks like in this space or the next. And because, like I said in one of the previous episodes, I feel like it actually is a superpower. We should probably get a better understanding of what vulnerability actually is and what it looks like. So for the 5 different types, this is just surface level. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't do too much research because after a little bit, I was just like, I'm not an expert and I don't want y'all to be asking me too many questions because I don't know. I don't know, y'all. I don't know. I'm learning with you. So I'm gonna give you what I learned so far, and then we can learn together. We can all do our own research and we can put in the comments below what we learn on this journey, you know? So vulnerability can be classified into 5 types. This is actually according to the Yale assessment module training. So Yale got an assessment that y'all could take, but it says vulnerability can be classified into 5 types: cognitive, communicative, institutional, medical, and social. Each type of vulnerability requires different protective measures. Now, like we were talking about before, vulnerability is basically you exposing yourself to physical or emotional harm. So we said that vulnerability, it kind of triggers something to make you put up a wall, right? So if you were vulnerable at one point and somebody basically made you feel uncomfortable, or somebody said something that didn't sit well with you, a lot of times it caused you to create a wall. Or maybe you were open and you were your full self in a moment and it wasn't received well or received how you had hoped it would be. In that scenario, you're like, all right, well, let me put up another wall here. I know that I've done that several times, which is why I said that I've put up so much walls at this point. I don't know how many walls I got. I'm learning to take them down. So when you think about that, you think about how many times we expose ourselves, right, over our lifetime to potentially being harmed. And like I said before, this isn't just in the scenario of like your heart being broken or in romantic relationships. It's a lot of times like you expose yourself maybe as a child with an idea. You have an idea and you're like running to your parents to be like, oh, I just came up with this new invention in my head and it's not received how you thought it was going to be received. So then you're like, oh, well, all right, I guess I won't talk to them about this, or I guess I will keep this to myself from now on. Or maybe people think that this is weird, because sometimes you don't know, people be reacting and you be like, oh, I'm not, that wasn't a normal thing to do. Okay, won't do that again. Guess that's not socially acceptable. And then you put a wall up. Mind you, you're 4 years old. So probably wouldn't use those thoughts or those specific words, but at the end of the day, it was an inciting incident that then caused you to put up a wall, which is actually very interesting. Specifically now, as I'm learning to be more vulnerable, one way that I'm doing so, and I'm doing so intentionally, is in the way of asking for help. Now, asking for help is something that, Lord have mercy. I will be honest, it's not my forte. And it's not necessarily even like my favorite thing to do, because in asking for help, sometimes I haven't assessed my needs to a point where I even know what I need help with. Or I might be in a space where I feel like I'm not able to show people that I'm actually overwhelmed. Which I think as a superwoman and as Black women, a lot of times we are in spaces where we're not able to fully express that, like, okay, I'm a little bit overwhelmed, I need a moment. Or at least we feel like we're not in those spaces. But I think that that's where, when we talked about having a safe space, that's where that comes in. Or even in that moment, being vulnerable enough with yourself to just pause and be like, okay, I think I actually need help real quick. So let me figure out who I can talk to, or where I can go, or like what specific thing I need help with. Because I mean, example, earlier I was actually making dinner and my brother was like, do you need help with anything? And I'm like, I mean, probably, but I don't know. Like, with what? I have no idea. I don't know. Like, I'm sure you can help with something. I am a little overwhelmed, but with what? I have no idea, because I'm over here, I'm in the zone at this point. I'm making all of the things. I got about 4 or 5 pots on the stove. Mind you, we're also cleaning, like we started cleaning the stove, but didn't have time to finish. So like we got 2 burners open. So I'm over here prepping other stuff. I got the pressure cooker going. I got 2 pots on the stove. I got another pot that's waiting to go on. I'm over here peeling squash. It's a lot of stuff happening. And I was so absorbed with what I was doing, because also it's like a normal scenario to me just be cooking a bunch of stuff at one time. I didn't stop and like assess, like, do I actually need help? Is help an option? Is that an option? Like, can we get help? I can phone a friend? Is that an option? I didn't know. So when he asked that, I was like, I don't know. But then I kind of slowed down. I allowed myself to slow down. I allowed myself to be vulnerable and assess, like, okay, yes, I do need assistance. Can you do this? Can you do that? And it wasn't even necessarily like big things, but it helped a lot. And I think that in just allowing myself to be vulnerable in that moment, I was able to finally, because I know we talked about this before, it clicked again. It finally clicked again. I have help. There's somebody here that can help me. I don't have to do all this by myself. I have help. But I had to be vulnerable with myself and honestly be like, okay, number 1, you don't have to do all of this by yourself. But also number 2, I don't know if you could actually do all this by yourself right now. Because also, I kind of strained my shoulder a little bit. That's a whole nother story. So I really shouldn't have been, I shouldn't have been doing as many things as I was doing. but I was doing it anyways because that's just who I am. And I'm like, well, I want to eat before a certain time, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started on everything. But I think that looking at vulnerability from a standpoint of opening up rather than I don't like looking at it as opening up yourself to being harmed. I do, but I don't. I think maybe that's like that's like too vulnerable for me. I don't know if I'm mature enough for that yet, but it is a real thing. Because if you're being vulnerable, let's say like socially, or on some websites I saw it say communicatively. So if I'm being vulnerable in that way, that means that I might be actually opening up to somebody like in terms of communication and opening up those lines. And I guess asking for help is a way to do that. But even just opening up in a way that like I'm telling them more of my thought process or more about my emotional state or what brought me here. And I think that one of the scariest parts about being vulnerable in that way, and it's weird because it's one of the scariest parts, but it's also one of the most freeing parts, is that you actually have to dig deep into your memory bank and figure out, okay, what did lead me here? Because you can't tell somebody what brought you here and you don't even know. How you sharing that information? That means you made up something if you didn't take the time to actually assess it. Or somebody told you that this is what happened and you just went with it. And that's not always the case. Sometimes it's literally just a matter of like, okay, I gotta sit with these thoughts, I gotta sit with these feelings. And it's uncomfortable. I think one of the other ways, one of the other ways that they said was vulnerability can also refer to the relationship that people have with their environment, to social forces and institutions, and the cultural values that sustain and contest them. So switching topics a little bit, I think that a lot of us are in environments that we don't feel like we're able to be vulnerable. One of the things that I saw a lot when I was doing my little bit of research that I did was there's a lot of articles and a lot of studies about why and how Black women aren't able to be leaders and be vulnerable. I think that is bull, okay? I think that stereotypically, because we are often labeled as when we are passionate about things, we're labeled as being angry or we're labeled as being aggressive. A lot of times the spaces aren't created for us to be able to be vulnerable. But I think that when we get into places of leadership, it is possible for us to change that. I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm not saying that it's always going to be welcomed. But I feel like in this day and age where we are today, that we have the opportunity. I don't even want to say we got the responsibility because we don't have the responsibility. We have the opportunity to change that dynamic. And also because we're in the age of the internet, like we're able to show people like my vulnerability is not going to look like what Karen or Sarah's vulnerability looks like. That's just what it is. Because my life is different. My environment is different. What I go home to is different. And it may not be like the most significant difference, but culturally, my experience is different than hers. So what you're going to see from me as being a vulnerable Black woman in leadership is not how you're going to see it from anybody else. When you look at me as a leader in general, and anything that I do, it's not going to look how everybody else does it. Because number one, I'm going to bring a level of excellence that, okay, you might not have ever seen before. But also, I'm going to show you that I can be vulnerable in a professional way and express myself, get my point across. And everybody can be comfortable enough to have, like, feel safe enough to have their particular level of vulnerability within their workspace. Of course, you know, it's a workspace or whatever. So you still gotta, you know, be at work. But like I can do both. Now, you might be mad, but I think that it's important that we eliminate the stereotypes of, I guess, the idea that we have to be the strong Black woman. And I'm learning that because I think as superwomen, we are all just naturally the strong Black women. Like that's just in us, okay? Let's be honest. But we can allow ourselves a moment to like step back a little bit and be a little bit more free. I think that is important, and figuring out what that looks like for you in whatever scenarios that you're in is important as well, because I'm over here talking but I don't live the life that you live. I don't walk in your specific shoes either, and that's why it's like you have to figure out what does vulnerability mean to you. What type of way do you feel like you need to be vulnerable, whether it be in a workspace or whether it be at home? Even if you feel like, all right, well, I don't want to be a vulnerable leader, but you can still use your softer skills to communicate with your team and to lead with your team. You don't have to be like super hard on people, but you can also be an effective leader. Yeah. But I think that you got to be vulnerable to even assess what you need to improve on or what skills you need to lean into to make that happen. I think vulnerability is not a one-size-fits-all thing. Even though they have 5 types of vulnerability, at the core of it is that it's based off of your environmental, your cultural situations, like your environment and what you experience. The people that you're around, they dictate your level of vulnerability. They dictate how many walls you put up, whether it be like from childhood or it's like you just started putting up walls now. Like that is important to your journey. And it's important to like your self-love journey, not even just your vulnerability journey. And as I'm going through this era of my self-love journey, I'm taking a look at the type of people that I want to interact with and the type of people that I want around me, the type of people that I want to work with. It's not necessarily the same that I used to be around. And that's important for me to know. But that's something that I had to sit down and think like, okay, well, what part of these interactions affected me? Or what parts of them did I like and I felt like I can bring something away from it, versus what did I feel like I could do without, or it's no longer serving me in this season of my life. Yeah, it's layers to this, and I'm still learning. Dear Black woman, it's not easy out here on these vulnerable streets, okay? But you can do anything that you put your mind to. You can do anything that you decide to step forward in, and you have something in you that most people have never seen before, never witnessed. But the only way that you're going to get to it is if you allow yourself to be vulnerable. That may be through your words, your work, your art, in your home, wherever it is, with your partner, whatever you feel like would be your safe space, your bubble. Just make sure that you are checking in with yourself, assessing your needs, being vulnerable with you so that you can also start to be vulnerable with the world around you. Open yourself up. It is scary, but it'll help you. Love the creative Black woman. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. I appreciate each and every one of you for being here. And also, don't forget, if you want to watch this podcast live, head over to my Patreon. The link is in the bio. But also, I just released a song called Up to You. Make sure y'all check that out. And I will see y'all next week. Bye.